Hello, my name is Melanice Noella. Tonight's room exists beside plastic crown. In the song, the crown is already being worn. In this room, it is still being made. Let's begin. The workshop opened from the back of a narrow shop, behind a curtain that smelled of dust, glue, and dried leaves. A wooden frame stood in the center of the room. Its rails were scratched from years of clamps, hooks, wire, and blades. On the long table beside it lay scissors, pliers, rolls of ribbon, plastic flowers, thin stems, loose beads, and coils of glowing cord in pink, green, and pale yellow. The worker arrived before the front lights were switched on. The first task was always to clear the frame. Loose threads were cut away. Broken stems were swept into a cardboard tray. Dried glue was scraped from the lower rail with a metal ruler. The worker checked the order sheets clipped to the side of the table and arranged them in a row beneath the shop owner's phone. There were 3 crown headpieces due before noon, 12 small wrist garlands for a studio shoot, and 1 circular wreath to be repaired before evening. The wreath had come back in a paper bag with a note pinned to it. Some flowers had slipped to one side during delivery. 1 vine had snapped near the center. The note asked only that it be made stable. The crown frames were stacked in a plastic box. They were light and smooth, with small rounded points along the top edge. The worker placed one on the table, wiped dust from the inside curve, and threaded a strand of pale green cord through the first hole. The same spool sat close enough to reach the wreath later. The first crown was easy. The worker pulled the cord through the holes, looped it around the points, and tied it under the back band. The plastic held its shape. The small flowers sat upright. When the worker placed it on the foam stand, the crown leaned slightly to the left. The worker untied the back and pulled the cord tighter. The lean disappeared. The flowers pressed closer to the plastic points. The second crown took longer. Its frame had a shallow bend near the center, almost invisible until the cord crossed it. Each time the worker pulled, the frame corrected itself for a moment, then slowly returned to the bend. The worker set 1 thumb against the plastic and tightened the strand with the other hand. The cord made a clean line across the front, bright against the dull table. The plastic creaked. The worker loosened the strand and tried again. At mid-morning, the shop owner entered through the curtain carrying a mug and 2 more printed orders. The phone on the table lit when it was touched. A photo opened on the screen showed a crown from the last delivery. The image had been marked with red circles around the flowers and the top edge. The shop owner tapped the screen once, then pointed at the crown on the foam stand. The worker added another loop of cord. The crown stood taller. One of the small flowers bent forward until its wire stem showed through the tape. The wrist garlands came next. They were made on a smaller frame with pegs around the edges. The worker stretched pink cord from peg to peg, then threaded leaves between the lines. These could not be pulled as tightly. If the cord was too loose, the leaves shifted and gathered in one corner. If it was too tight, the thin stems broke under the pressure. The worker tested each line with a fingertip before tying it. 1 garland held. Another twisted. The third came apart when lifted. The shop bell rang in the front room. Voices moved behind the curtain, low and brief. The worker kept both hands on the frame until the voices stopped. A strand of green cord lay across the table, running from the spool to the unfinished wreath in the paper bag. The worker picked up the wreath and placed it on the larger frame. It was not fresh, but it was not ruined. Several leaves had curled at the tips. 2 flowers had flattened where the bag had pressed against them. The snapped vine hung from the lower half like a loose wire. The old cord was not removed right away. First, the wreath was turned once on the table. Then again. The loose side dipped each time it passed over the worker's wrist. The same pale green cord was measured against the broken section. It was a little too bright for the older leaves. The worker measured it anyway. By early afternoon, the crown headpieces stood in a row on foam stands. They were finished, but not identical. One held its flowers high. One sat lower at the back. One had a point that bent inward where the cord had been pulled too hard. The shop owner came in again, checked the row, and adjusted the middle crown with 2 fingers. The crown rocked, then steadied. The phone was lifted from the table. The marked photograph appeared again. The red circles sat over the flowers, the top edge, and one side of the frame. The shop owner compared the photograph with the crowns on the stands, then set the phone down beside the order sheets. After a few seconds, the screen went black. A delivery box was opened on the floor. Tissue paper was folded inside. The crowns were placed in it one by one. The worker tucked padding around them. The bent point remained visible until a layer of paper covered it. The scissors were still in the worker's hand when the box was taped shut. A thin red mark had appeared across the side of one finger where the cord had slipped earlier. The wreath waited on the large frame. After the delivery driver left, the room became quiet except for the small fan near the window. The worker returned to the wreath, cut away the old knots, and drew the green cord through the lower curve. The first pull brought the broken vine back into place. The second pull lifted the flattened flowers. The third pull made the frame oval. The worker loosened it. The flowers dropped. The worker pulled again, less than before. The snapped vine held, but the loose side still sagged. Near closing, the front lights were turned off, leaving only the workshop lamp above the frame. The lamp made the cord glow brighter than it had during the day. The wreath was still clamped to the wood. Beside it, the last crown frame lay upside down, left over from the morning order, its empty holes catching small points of light. The shop owner's phone remained on the table, screen black, beside the order sheets. The worker cut a fresh length from the spool and threaded it through the lower curve of the wreath. The loose end crossed the table, passed over the plastic crown, and fell near the scissors. For a moment, both objects were joined by the same strand, not tied to either one. The worker pulled. The wreath rounded. The crown shifted slightly on the table. The worker pulled again. A flower stem inside the wreath bent, but did not break. The green cord pressed into the worker's finger, deepening the red mark already there. The crown slid closer to the phone until its plastic points touched the black glass. On the dark screen, the upside-down crown and the blurred shape of the worker's face appeared together under the workshop lamp. A fingerprint broke the reflection near the center. The silver handle of the scissors lay open beside the loose end. The worker held the strand between thumb and forefinger. The cord trembled. The wreath kept its shape. The crown remained upside down against the black glass. The scissors stayed open. The workshop lamp hummed over the wooden frame. The worker's hand stayed still, holding the line at the point where one more pull would tighten it, and one small release would let it slip. Thank you for staying with the story. Before you leave, give this room a title of your own, not the title it was given, just the one it leaves behind. The director has asked me to leave the room open for 13 more seconds. Again, the image should look familiar. You have, after all, been looking at it since before we met. The director tells me it is different now. I suppose I'll have to take his word for it. Belle and Audie would probably ask why. My name is Melanice Noella. I will meet you in the next room. Goodbye.